My name is Manuela Corbari of A Little Door. Thanks for having us here today, Sorcha.
Thank you very much for being with us. And we're also joined by Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Fuller, and I'm a visual artist and puppeteer. And it's great to be here. And I've been working with Manuela at the beginning of this project. And so we're happy to be sharing and talking about it with you.
Great, thank you very much. And Joanne.
Hi, Sorcha, lovely to be here. I'm Joanne Webb. I'm a theatre maker, so a performer, director, writer, and I've been with this project for about a year and a half now, I think.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being with us. It's a really exciting prospect to be able to talk about a piece with everybody who's been involved in really building it from the initial idea all the way through to the performance. So I'm looking forward to it. Manuela, would you tell us a little bit about the piece itself, 9 Stories About Love, and where it came from?
Sure. Yes. So this is the book 9 Stories About Love, and this is the original Italian version, 9 Storie sull'amore. So this was a present from my mom, who heard one of the stories read at the radio in Italy, and it's not Giovanna Zoboli is not. This is not a famous book or well-spread Italian, well-known Italian book, but the stories are so beautiful. And as soon as I read them, I felt they had so much potential because they are very poetic and they talk about love as connection, as beauty, and very different idea from just the romantic love that we're more used to. So I thought this would have been a great kind of starting point to explore. I decided to get in touch with Sarah, and we started to work on ideas from the story. So the first thing we did, we actually presented one of the story as just kind of a seed during Baboro 2016 to an audience of delegates, and they seemed to be really touched and definitely positive of the idea of kind of exploring this story. So then through the tiny shows and the support of Baboro and GTF and Grow, Pathway to Production, and all the supporters, and the Roscommon Art Center, we slowly developed the project. So it now became a theatre play, which we were supposed to present at the Theatre Festival as a finished piece, finally, after so many years of work in progress and changes. And it's a pity that didn't happen, but great to be able to be here and talk about it in this way.
It is a pity that it didn't happen, but I hope that it will be presented in its final format in the future, hopefully soon. What age group is the piece kind of directed at?
Yeah, so the piece we decided for 5 to 9 years old. Okay. We decided not to change the stories, the actual wording of the stories too much, as the stories are just like poems. They are so rich, and the use of language I thought was beautiful. And so even if, I think the 5-year-old maybe wouldn't necessarily get all the single words that are in the stories, there are so many layers of understanding and enjoying the stories that we thought was good to kind of widen, because it's a strange age, 5 to 9, but I think the different ages can enjoy the piece for different reasons.
Great. And how did you find the process of adapting a book to the stage?
Yes, so the only other thing I've ever done before was another project that was actually at the Galway Theatre Festival, I think in 2015, as a work in progress, was called Il Mondo Rotondo, and that was completely invented by me. So this was quite different. It was great to have like a starting point that was so rich, and we worked so much reading and rereading the stories, and really exploring and kind of opening up, like, you know, those kind of matrioscas or little dolls. Once you start opening, you realize there is more meaning and inside. So it was a great starting point, and the more we worked on it, the more we kind of noticed different nuances or subtleties, and so yeah. And also there was a discussion about how truthful do we need to be to the actual words, or is it just the meaning of the story? And also another interesting question about starting from a book was that it was 9 stories about love, so it's 9 stories. And how do you create a theater piece starting from such an episodic piece? And so we discussed a lot about this. Do we need to keep the story separate, or do we need to find a thread, or do we need to use one story as kind of a common framework, and then all the other characters come within? So it's been an interesting process.
Yeah, great. It sounds really interesting. And I love the fact that it's 9 stories about love, but love in so many different forms, which is really lovely idea, I think. Sarah, you're the world builder in terms of the puppets and the set for 9 stories about love. What was the process like, and the kind of, how did you approach building a world that has an introduction through the book?
It's been a really interesting journey, and it's been a really long journey. We've had this very extended time frame, and it's gone on so many different, it's had so many different kind of ways of becoming. So it started out when we were working in the Branagh space, and we started devising the show together, and we had some things that were there were some sets that we used, and they kind of like frames, and they kind of gave us the idea of almost like pages of a book. So we had this sort of a very different form to the form we've ended up with. So how it began has ended up quite differently to what it's become, and that has resulted in a lot of input as well from everybody who's worked on it. So the ideas for the sets and the way that they are have evolved collaboratively through the process of making and thinking about the stories. So I couldn't take ownership of the decisions that have been made as to the final thing, because they've been very much a shared and an evolutionary process through everybody's input. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a project that has really, as you said, evolved almost organically through the different supports and the different inputs that you've had over the years. I'm a huge fan of a long and slow process, because I think you learn so much, and there's so much scope for good stuff to come out of all of that.
Yeah, it's like a really slow cook, and it's been made, and it's been unmade, and it's been reshaped, and it's like almost like a bit of clay squidging about, and now it's finally kind of found its form, it's landed, and it feels like, oh yes, great, you know, it's a nice feeling to feel like it. It's lovely to have that long time frame, and it's been quite extended as well over, you know, we've had like pockets of time, and then we've so it's been nice to see it land and to see it find its shape, and I really love making the sets and miniature worlds, and seeing them come together. And I think a lovely moment was at the end of Barbaro, when all the children came up at the end of the show, and they were in the world that we had created, and they were part of that world. And I stood back, and I could see them all just immersed around, like they were included in the piece that we had created. And that was a lovely complete kind of journey to see that, the audience being part of it so much.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's a lovely it's quite a powerful image actually of the children then having watched and slowly been introduced to this world, to then getting the chance to actually walk in and be part of it. That's really powerful. Joanne, what was your experience as a performer working with the puppets and kind of working with the stories and the how the whole world was evolving?
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me, because as I said earlier, I came in at a time where it had already, been in process for quite a long time. Sarah and Manuela had worked on the show for over 2 years by the time I came in, and initially I came in more as a producer, with the possibility that I might occasionally step into a role that Ionia Nicroni was doing at the time. So it's been amazing, because I think, like, it's so interesting. I mean, I saw the show quite early on and loved it. So to then come into something and have a chance to sort of change and shape it and see the new ideas that came in. Most of the work that I've done previously, whether it's been devised or whether it's been with the script, it tends to sort of go in a certain way. But what's been great about this process is that Manuela and Sarah in particular, and all the other people that they said have shaped it, have been really brave with it. So it's really changed so much. And that's such a gift as a performer, to be able to be involved in something which has such scope for change and for input. And I love that. I mean, because sometimes, you just turn up as a performer and you're given a script and you're directed. So, and it's been a challenge as well, because I think there's so many threads of the old ways of doing it. Sometimes I think we've had moments where it's like, why are we doing that? And for me, I mean, I haven't done any puppeteering since drama school, which is 150 years ago. It's lovely to be able to work on a new skill. And Sarah in particular, has been brilliant with that, because I feel so awkward, because the puppets that she's made are so alive, and I think I was already in love with them before I even started working with them, so to manipulate them feels like a very precious task or something, and so it's been lovely. And also for me, the language, particularly with the translation and the decision to stay with quite challenging language for that age group and to make that work, and it has been really beautiful. I mean, the language is just, as Manuela said, it's just such beautiful poetry. So I think as a performer, that's just been a real gift, to be able to step into something which is both created and open to evolving. So I've loved the process, and I loved, like Sarah said, I love the fact that it kind of feels like it's settled down now and it's home, and we found a language between us as performers as well as the world itself. So it's been a really lovely process to be part of.
It's really striking how warm the way the three of you have spoken about it. There's a huge amount of heart in this team, but also in the project itself, which is really lovely. So thank you for allowing me to be kind of and get an insider view of what is a really lovely team and project. Manuela, I've lots of questions. I find the whole idea of both adaptation, translation, working with there's 2 source texts in both the Italian and the English. All of that is really fascinating. And then to bring in puppets and all of that into it, it just is a really there's a huge amount of nuance in this. Did you find that the English the English translation was sufficient, or did you feel yourself going back to the Italian and wanting to kind of play around with the English a bit?
Yes, actually I did.
Okay.
because the way it's written, the book, even in Italian, it's quite not complex in its grammar, but it has very precious words that you wouldn't necessarily find in a children's book, or you wouldn't necessarily use in your common language, but they're like jewels. And sometimes they were lost in the translation, or some expressions that just a way of saying something or describing that was kind of lost in the translation, I felt. And so, not often, but in a couple of places, we decided to change the translation to be more truthful to the original Italian. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting, because I do think that some things can only be said in many ways in one language, and so many things. And I think I, as a semi-Irish speaker, or trying to be an Irish speaker, find that there's often words and phrases that I think as Irish people we have ways of speaking that come out of our history with our language. Even if we don't necessarily speak the language very well, we have our own English speaking has evolved through the historical speaking of Irish. I don't know if that makes any sense. And so there are things that are almost foundational in one language that don't really fully get all the way across in another. So that it makes a lot of sense to me that some of the translation doesn't quite get as far as you would like it to go.
Really kind of, I imagine the Irish, from what the bits that I know, that is quite visual language. And then and so, like, sometimes I feel that Irish and so the Italian expressions really captured an image so vividly, visually, that then the translation wasn't so as powerful as the original was. So
cool. So it's quite an alive project in terms of all of the source material that you have, and it seems to be, well, it kind of leaps out at you, even just in this conversation, the joy in it and the nuance in it. So I'm very, very much looking forward to actually seeing it in its final form, that, as you said, that has found a home and found a language. It has been adapted in and of itself. Tell me about the adaptation that you've done for the hospital setting.
So yes, the whole process, it's been very quite organic how it developed. So initially I wanted to work with Sarah, so the puppet kind of happened because Sarah is a puppeteer. It wasn't necessarily my choice. So it was actually beautiful to follow, the way it kind of seemed to be developing.
I was invited to do a residency for the hospitals, and it just worked that the theme of our show that we were working on with 9 stories fitted exactly with the theme that they wanted to use. The adaptation has a different title because it's called A Bird at My Window and Other Stories. And that title came about through doing the workshop sessions with the initial stage of the hospital project, where we went to the different wards, the different children, and we worked just with a story and telling the stories, and the children making their own creations in response to the stories. So we're testing them to see, how do the children respond to them? Is this something that we can work with within the hospital? And finding that the adults and the children were all really, like, they really did respond to the words, and they really did respond to the content. And one little girl made a bird based on the story of the little girl who found a bird. And she hadn't been able to get outside of her room, and the bird that she made gave her the kind of motivation, or the desire to get outside and be in the sunshine. And it was really lovely, to see that sort of through that process of workshopping together and making something, how that had enabled something else to happen. And Manuela and I, at that initial stage, we were doing quite a lot with animation with the children as well. They were making their little stop frame animations based on the stories that we were working with. So that was another thing that came out of that process. Have I gone off track? What did you ask me?
No, you haven't at all. Just
No.
the whole idea of how, like, the idea of a hospital, which obviously we think of as being in many ways such a clinical place, but it's also the kind of center of our lives in many ways, in terms of, you know, that's where all of the life, the birth and death and illness and pain, but also joy and love and hope, they all live within a hospital. So it's a really really powerful thing to then be able to bring art into that, because that's where art flourishes, is in the most kind of all of those really complex human emotions that we deal with all the time. So I would imagine that was a very fruitful process.
Yeah, it's a very potent space, I think. Also in that kind of, you're in that sort of limbo, that waiting, a different kind of headspace when you're in the hospital. And we noticed through the workshopping, through the first runs of testing out how to present and create a show in that context, that the parents were very much part of who we were making the work for. It wasn't just for the children in this case, which was when we were doing the show for an audience, like the 9 stories, it was about children, obviously families as well, but this was very intimate and very much designed for like one child and their parents, or maybe a sibling and their parents. So they were very much involved in who the experience of having a piece of theatre, you know, to direct it towards.
Yeah, it's it's really such a powerful and important thing to be able to bring theatre and art into such places like that. So
challenging as well, because you have to keep, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Continue, yeah.
Just because like you might be all ready to go, and you know, to do the performance, go into the room, you have the trolley set up, or the table with all the things, and then the doctors go in, and so you have to obviously you have to wait until the moment is right, and then sometimes you can't go in at all because other things happen. So you have to be very, very flexible and very adaptable. And in a way, the whole process of making the show has been about breaking things down, rebuilding them, and so it's like an exaggerated form of that, where you have to sort of almost drop everything and improvise and think, okay, well, let's do it this way then. What have we got? Let's play with the potential of trying it. Like Manuela was saying, the isolation wards, we hadn't anticipated how we would present a performance outside of the room, and that kind of happened in quite an intuitive, improvised way, where we thought, oh, we could try the piece of paper on the wall as on the door, the glass door, as a shadow screen, and then we cut a little door and the puppet came through the paper door, and then we started writing on the paper like a little message from the puppet, but we had to write it back to front because obviously we thought it was, you know, mirrored. And then it made us think about how they can't hear what we're saying because they're in the room, and we're outside of the room, and so there's all kinds of things that you have to kind of adapt to. And I don't know, again, now with the whole situation as it is, we don't really know how it's going to be for the next phase, or how we're going to be able to actually end up presenting the show. So it might be, you know, have to adapt it again.
Yeah, but no doubt all that adaptation will stand to you.
Yeah,
because it seems like a very kind of light on its feet piece, which is hopefully going to be useful for getting back and going. So one of the things you've sent me, Manuela, to share with our public on socials are little animations that you've been doing during lockdown. How did that come about, and what was that like, working remotely on projects like that?
Yes, so after an initial kind of few weeks of despair, I guess, I was talking to Jo, and she suggested to meet up even on Zoom like once a week. And yeah, it was a great idea, because really felt like that the project needed to be kept alive. And just through our conversations, we decided to start just working on ideas on another story, because there's 9 stories, but on the theater show we're using only 5 of the 9 stories. But we are always talking about, oh, maybe we should add this one or maybe this other one. So we decided to start just even thinking about one of the stories, which ended up then being one of the animations. So Joanne recorded the reading of the story, and then for one I did stop motion animation, Sarah did some drawing, and then we had some drawing from Sarah, some digital drawing done for another version, a previous version of the show, so we decided to use that. And then for the third animation, we decided to go full animation with kind of layers and proper done drawing. So we ended up with 3 different animations that are very different in style, and there are 3 different stories. One of them it's in the show and 2 others are not. So it was actually great to just keep working with the stories and the themes in different ways, and the ways that were actually obviously possible to do at this time. So yes, it was great. It was great to keep kind of creatively alive and to keep working on the project, the 3 of us, and who knows where this will go. So yeah, and then so it's 3 animations, and then the other video is the trailer and some of the footage of the what Joanne was talking about, and Sarah, about children kind of immersing in within the sets, as we did emerging work, kind of work in progress, showing at Barbaro, and then we had some footage from Barbaro. So I've put together a small kind of children talking about the show and a small visual edit.
Great. And Joanne, how did you find that process of working creatively and remotely? Had you done that kind of voiceover readings before? What was that like?
Yeah, it was great. I'm really glad that I came sort of from a point of despair, as Manuela said, of like, but I'd started back with another project that I'm working on, and I'd started a brand new project with a group of people that I'd never met via Zoom. And what I was finding was that although it's not the same as being in a room with creative people, there's some really lovely things that can happen. And like in particular, one of the stories, the woman who says goodbye to her land, I could never imagine actually being able to do that on stage, because I find it so so moving. Just even thinking about that story nearly moves me to tears. So to be able to record the voice myself at home gave me a chance to sort of really be with it, and be with it, you know, slowly. And I mean, the stories are so beautiful. They're all so rich. So it's lovely. It's so nice. Like sometimes I've recorded the audio before, and sometimes I've done it after I've seen a little bit of what Sarah and Manuela have done. And that's been really interesting, how much that informs it and changes it. So yeah, as I said, definitely not as rich as being in the room with these 2 wonderful women, but great to be able to kind of maintain that. And it's really, I think it's really, yeah, it's brought in something completely new again. You know, a different way of working that we wouldn't have found in the room when we're doing it. And you know, we've had sessions where we've set up little bits on our kitchen table, and you know, it's been really playful, because I think a lot of the time for me, as you know, I don't get that chance to sort of make things or create, and that's opened up a lot for me as well. So it's been really lovely to do it that way.
Great, good. It's I'm always heartened by hearing of people who've been not only kept projects alive, but have started new things in all of what's going on at the moment. It just reminds me constantly that the art will flourish, because we're too determined to do it, to let it not flourish. It's been really, really lovely chatting to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me for this little chat and for an insight into 9 Stories About Love. As I said, I'm really looking forward to when I can enter the world of the piece. But I've had a look at the animations and they're gorgeous. So I'm really excited to be able to share them with everybody, and to see how the project readapts and readapts and readapts as it continues to go through. So thank you very much, Joanne, Sarah and Manuela, for this lovely chat. And I hope we will speak to you soon and see you even sooner if we can.
Thank you, Sorcha.
Thanks so much.